It's a very good plan.
I hope he's got lots of coffee to drink on the way down.
Yes.
So, all right, so, we'll start off with old business. And the old business is having to do with Spectrum's plan to cover Chapel under our franchise agreement. Have you heard anything further?
The last I've heard, it was in engineering.
Okay, and so that
That's where
was-
it is.
Okay, so by the end of January, we hope to get more than that, I suppose.
I would hope to get more than that. I ask every week.
Very good.
And we've got 9 months from what date?
Technically, the date that the last application went in, which was 2 weeks after they all went in, because we had a latecomer.
Right.
So 9 months from, I'm gonna say, the end of November.
I guess would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's good. So we will keep our,
Maybe at the end of August roughly, we'd be looking at.
yeah.
Cool, I can still count. Awesome.
Yeah, so that's, and they are, as you all know, the people over there are waiting with smiles on their faces, looking forward to this
Yes, they are.
conclusion to give them connectivity. All right, so under new business, going right into new business, we have a number of possibilities that we can discuss. There are two remaining areas that represent what we call unserved broadband pockets. And they are where we have a limited number of residents in a small area, which are all within a mile or less that need connectivity that we're trying to help through. And the first one, of course, is the Store Mountain Road situation, which involves the existing provider for that area closing down the system. And we have Mr. Letney here this evening to address this subject with us. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I don't know how much Max has shared with you regarding, we have put together a letter of interest regarding LCI and see if they would come up Store Mountain Road and possibly over to Jackson Road from the telephone poles in
So
our.
did they take that tower down? The old
Red Zone?
GWI tower, yeah.
It's on the docket.
It is
To
on
be
the
taken
docket.
down.
Okay, I thought they took it down,
No,
but it's gone.
it's been decommissioned.
Yep.
They were given until the middle of February to take it down and take down all the ancillary materials.
So you have basically nothing there now in terms of service, unless you wanted,
I ended up going to HughesNet, at least
Yeah.
as an interim,
yeah.
Because I mean, unfortunately, this day and age, you gotta have the ability to communicate.
So how many months did you have to commit to in order to,
Well, it's a 2-year program.
oh, that's better than 3 or 4.
Right.
so.
So, I mean, it's about $75 with taxes.
Is that TV and internet?
No, just internet.
Just internet?
Yeah, we already have a dish, so we've had that for
Okay.
forever.
And what kind of speeds are they offering you, Jeff?
20 meg.
20 up,
We got the 20.
20 up, 20
Gig.
down?
Let's see, 20, it's 20 gigabytes.
Not 20 megs.
20 megs down.
20 megs down.
Yeah.
Yeah. 20 gigs I'll buy right now.
And it's, what is, I'm not sure if the latest
I
is
don't like,
up,
shoot, I didn't bring
but
my
it's less than
folder.
20.
Yeah.
So far, I mean, Mitch came over the other day and installed it, and Red Zone went out basically January 2nd. So he was there on Wednesday, got it set up, and we're up and running. I mean, I don't know if you had a chance to see some of the numbers that LCI
Yes.
presented.
Yeah.
After I picked myself up off the floor and had two shots of tequila. It was a little,
That's all it took for you?
a lot of money.
Right, so
But-
it's interesting that you're going over that right away. Before we get into that detail, if you don't mind, I'd like
No,
to
no, I'm sorry.
just sort of recap. Your road is a characteristic of a situation.
Right.
We have a mile-long road that is in the north end of Waldeboro.
Correct?
It's been unserved since, some of the people on that road haven't been able to get the connectivity off of the tower up at your area, as I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So they didn't have service, even with the system that was there.
And part of this, the topography,
Right,
the situation being that at the end of the road, at the beginning of the road, Red Zone is still working with the Moyles family. The Morrises actually do a satellite or a hotspot with a tower down here. John Morris has the ability to do that
on his cellular phone.
on a cellular phone. John, let's see, Gene Thomas has Viasat or what's it called, Exceed?
Right,
Exceed. So us, my wife, myself, Jimmy, Jackie, and my sister Audrey, we're getting service via the Red Zone Tower. And that was part of the negotiated agreement with it. And we had phone with them. So right now, my sister's in Indonesia, so that's not an issue. There's another person that bought property, like family, that would be interested in getting involved, and certainly my son and his wife. So, the other people that was being serviced by the tower, once decommissioned, there was only 4 or 5 people left out of probably, I don't know, 14 or 15 people. It was determined that there was no real ability to handle it, and without doing some kind of a significant upgrade.
right. So there are people in town, I've heard from one resident up right across from Morse's Sauerkraut, who has school-aged children and had connectivity off of that tower.
Correct.
And they are stuck with a similar situation. And the other thing that it's important to know, that using satellite is not considered served by the state of Maine under the Connect Me authority because of the delay, latency that's produced with that kind of a long haul to the satellite and back. It makes it less competitive to the other providing techniques that are used. So that puts you in a perfect spot for a replacement grant from the state, I think. And we just have to figure out how to best pick a provider and work on the project to see if we can't come up with a better solution for you. And me personally, I would recommend fiber as opposed to cable.
Well,
So,
we had the opportunity to get together at the Morrises with, just prior to Christmas, with some people that, over on Jackson Road or going up Clary Hill
right,
Road, where LCI went, and on to get up on Clary Hill. And in talking with them, they have fiber.
right.
And
You want
it's
fiber.
like, it's like unreal.
Yeah, you
You know,
want.
Yeah,
and
they
they,
have-
and they, and it says, I don't wanna hear it, because we hadn't had this yet.
Right. So the, let's see, the Hinkleys is one
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
and then there's another family
Miller,
that's up on the other road runs, you and I drove up there in that area, and they're on the other side of the Madomic Pond,
yeah,
the small pond there.
yeah.
And they have fiber to their home as well on Jackson.
How far, I thought it went up like maybe half a mile, if that.
I
From
think
Old Augusta Road?
It goes off of Old Augusta Road up to, there's a three-way fork.
Correct.
And we're talking about Jackson, and
Which would be to the left.
to the furthest to the left, you go
Yeah.
up that road. And the next to last house is where it's
Stops.
serving.
So
It stopped.
how many feet up Jackson Road is that they stopped?
we didn't actually measure it, but it's many poles.
Many poles.
Many poles, and each pole is 200 feet apart. So I would say it's, maybe close to a mile.
And is it correct to say LCA put that in with the grant, with the money from the former grant that we
Right.
got for Old Augusta Road?
Right.
Yep.
And we didn't even know, quite frankly, we didn't know that they were even
do
gonna
it.
do that. They did this on their own as part of the rollout of the fiber for Old Augusta Road. And they went to that point because they had pole access that was not gonna cost them anything, because there was nobody in there occupying the pole except the power and the telephone.
Right.
So there was plenty of space. So they went ahead and did an install up through that area. And I also think they had other requirements that they thought about doing what's called a redundancy loop of fiber, so that if they went up through into Union, they could tie in and provide another routing for increasing reliability of this type of technology.
So there were advantages.
Which,
Yeah,
yeah.
they had other
Absolutely.
advantages, and that's when you plan out a network, that's what you, having two ways to the sources of connectivity is the preferred way. Now, the Old Augusta Road doesn't have that
Right.
at all at this point.
No redundancy
No.
loops at all, it's just, it goes out in one place.
It
you're
goes to
done.
the point of presence in Warren and then runs the whole length, 5.5 miles along there. And, but their goal is to eventually provide that.
That's what the yellow line in that map, I know they show a
Yeah.
future state on one of those maps.
Right, and there's a number of ways to do it. They could either do it by going down through Flanders Corner to onto 32 and come back down to Noblesboro Road, or go all the way to Route 1. Noblesboro Road is right there by the industrial park, and that would be one way to get to it, or they could go all the way to Route 1. And then there'd be a redundant loop to enhance the reliability of our LCI connectivity in the town. So, anyway, these considerations have to be weighed along with
Sure.
the picture, and Store Mountain would be just like other roads in our town. The other way they could go is just continue up Old Augusta Road into Jefferson, and at the top of the hill called Kennedy Corners there, there's a tower there,
Right.
which is in Jefferson, that they put in on our grant. And it didn't provide the connectivity they said it would.
This was the tower that was put in under the first grant that we got with
Right.
GWI.
Right.
Yeah,
And so they ended up adding one at the south end of Flanders Corner Road, which is interesting to note that the people that are using that tower are not right there at the south end of Flanders Corner Road, because they can't get reliable connectivity through the vegetation,
Yeah.
because they're under the umbrella, so to speak, and the antennas are up above the umbrella.
Yeah.
And so then, they're covering a wider area, like even people down on Noblesboro Road connect up to that tower. So anyway, that's sort of an overview. So looking at your situation, it looks to me like the big challenge here is to figure out a way to make it economically viable for the provider to expand the system
Right.
in your area.
Jim, did you say you've got 15 people living on Store Mountain?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I said, when GWI had it, or Mid-Coast, and probably at the beginning of the red zone scenario, there was probably 15, 14,
Off the
15
tower.
families down over on 220 and that area.
Got it.
There was about that,
Yeah.
but it dwindled very quickly because of unreliability.
Right. And I knew people over on the other side of the main, Mondomic Pond, the main one, right in that area,
Right.
which I think is, what's called Horse Nest Sense Road. It's
Oh, yeah.
right in
Yeah.
there. They weren't able to get adequate connectivity, and yet they could see the
See
tower.
the tower. Yeah.
Right. And that's because they had too many subscribers trying to connect to that tower at the same time at the popular times of day when people want to operate. In addition, there were people on Nash Road that were going across that whole area, which is up by Flanders Corner, going the other direction, that were also connected to that tower. And then they had a sub-site on the Rocky Ridge, which was a 50-foot or 60-foot telephone pole that gave them local connectivity, and it backhauled over to your tower before it went down to back through a routing of wireless, what they call point-to-point, as opposed to multi-point. It's the backhaul link.
Okay.
It goes to the site where Dick Liddon's tower is. That is the main access point to the fiber in the area. And they've changed some of that around, so I'm not 100% on the accuracy of what I said, but that's the way it was then. And now we have a tower in Jefferson that's up by the cell tower up on Mountain Road in Jefferson. There's 100-some-odd foot tower, and there are a bunch of people in that town that are scattered around that are getting connectivity off of that.
Is that red zone?
Yes, it's red zone.
So how many people would LCI be able to serve on Store Mountain Road?
Well, I think realistically, you know, you have two people that are pretty much locked in to what they're doing. So, and then 5 to 6, counting the Hodgkin family, which are actually on Jackson Road. So there'd be about 5.
And if
5
you,
to 6.
if over
the
time,
economics are there.
if over time, all of them were able to break the bonds of what they now have and go into this LCI arrangement, how
We're
many
looking
would
at
there be?
7 or 8.
7 or 8? Is
So
it,
yeah,
is it worth a $23,000 investment to serve
well, let's
That's,
see.
that's just it.
7
Well,
or 8
first of
people?
all, the Jackson Road individual that's up there, that's a tenant in that house, right, as opposed to.
No, he owns it.
The-
It's
the-
Ginny Hodgkin's son, who's the grandson
Oh,
of the
okay.
Jacksons.
When we
He's a-
drove up there the other day, there was somebody else I thought that was living.
It might have been his mother.
Yeah.
Ginny
So-
grew up there.
Right, and the poles that go across on the north end of the
Pond.
pond
Come across from us.
would need to be upgraded to fulfill that, it appears to me, but I'm not the engineer that would do the survey. I'm just saying, based on my experience,
Yeah.
those poles up there are pretty debatable in terms of suitability. So I'm not sure they would be included in that. See, what we have to do is figure out, it isn't necessarily the maximum number of people, it's the maximum people in a pocket of distance.
Right.
So there's less cost per
Absolutely.
distance
Right.
that will then measure. And then the other part of the equation is meeting the score for Connect Me to get a grant. And the grants, the way we do it was we can usually get LCI to agree to doing a 50-50 grant, which they will make a 50% investment, right?
Yep.
And then Connect Me pays the other half. And the scoring system that they have is quite complicated.
I actually have it right here.
And if we want to review it at some point today, we could. But it shows me one thing. It doesn't cover communities that have had grants to fulfill their broadband needs that have small areas of people that were left out. And I mean that they were not covered in the grant. And left out means they have to go back and reconsider how they score these small little areas. And I've had a conversation recently with someone at Connect Me who agrees with me, but whether they can fulfill it. But it could be a pioneering effort to put in a grant request on the part of our town to ask for this kind of a grant, to see if we can get it, based on giving the rationale behind the idea.
Maybe one way of bumping up the score would be to say, you missed this pocket with the grant the first time around. What you did use the grant for has given us, what, 60 people? 60
Yeah.
connections?
Right.
So it could have been 65 or 66 if we had done this part as well.
Exactly.
And therefore, this merits consideration.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the other thing is if, and this, we're not standing alone by any stretch in the state of Maine. There's pockets like us everywhere.
Thank you.
So maybe,
I use that same argument already.
maybe the
by
real
way.
reality is that, there has to be several different types of criteria depending on what you're
Yeah.
faced with.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, let's be honest, Waldoboro, Maine has 5,000 people, but we have those pockets. So doesn't Noblesboro, so doesn't Timbuktu.
Yep.
So maybe it's time that
They
Connect
address
Me
that.
take a look at that and say, okay, how can we really serve the people of this state in a better manner? And, with the marching orders, so to speak, from our new governor, with the idea of trying to connect people more and try to give kids opportunity or young people opportunity. Maybe,
So
maybe we're at a good point
Right.
that this could really be a transition from what the norm has been.
Well, that's the strongest argument we have.
But you had another one, John. It was take this project in Flanders Corner and treat them as one project.
Well, that's another thing, to go back, have a special grant to go back in and do pockets and get one grant for two little pockets and get the take rate set up so it's gonna be a guaranteed take rate for the provider, so the incentive is there.
Right.
Not the way it's done right now. You put the cable on the street with a handshake and yeah, well, we'll think about it, and then you don't get the take rate necessarily.
Right.
But what I'm trying to do is suggest that we should figure out a way to sweeten this by getting as many people as possible in these little pockets to commit in a manner that would be considered a guarantee to the provider and also to Connect Me.
But you
Yeah.
had one other part to that, and that was the quid pro quo was that the provider would set a timetable for getting it done.
Yep.
So that people who were making a contractual commitment to the provider knew when they were gonna get hooked up.
And that they would then pay a grant. However, in order to guarantee to the provider, I'm suggesting they add another requirement for this type of a grant, and that is to have people come up with a deposit for the connection, for doing it as in a contract on the front end. And it wouldn't just be a large amount, it would be like, I live somewhere else in this country where in order to get them to bring power into my lot, we had to put up money before they'd even consider it.
But once they'd done it, the money you put up went to pay for your electricity, and it
Right.
was amortized over
Right.
so many months or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the basic issue right here, I mean, no matter which way you can put any twist on you want,
The cost.
it's cost. It's all about money.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, I was playing around with some numbers the other day, just, I was doodling. But, if you could somehow, take a look at that whole enchilada right here, and if we can get 50% off of that,
Yeah.
it might make it more palatable if it's amortized over 3 years. If you can tie in the Flanders Corner scenario, again, maybe that might sweeten the pot, but you're still talking, $115 a month
Over 3 years.
over 3 years, and then it would resort back to the $49.95.
Yeah, so that's one approach. The other
So-
approach would be to go to LCI and say, how about just getting a deposit from people for, like they did with, by the way, up in our area, when Spectrum first came in, it was then, before Spectrum, it was another company, I think it was Adelphia, that put in the cable. And what they did up there, they had to give them a contract and money in order to get them to run the cable. too.
Well, one of the statements here was, as another suggestion, they could take some upfront cash down, as part of a payment, and then try to come up with financing the rest. So, I mean, I think they're willing to try to negotiate, but, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, for 5 or 6 houses, you know, you look at the whole enchilada, it's 27, to
one
go
of
to
the-
Jackson Road, it's $27,600.
I feel we're not gonna do that option. Just my 2 cents. I don't think. I think even though it's just under 5,000, I think doing the extra bit for Jackson now may just be a bit unnecessary.
Yeah, unnecessary loading on the possibility of getting you guys connected.
Because that would be an
Because
extra.
it's only one.
Yeah, 5,000 for one person who I
One
don't even,
first,
who I don't even believe is there year
No, he
round.
isn't, he's at Quantico, he's a
Right.
colonel in
Yeah.
the
Right.
Air Force.
Yeah, so
But when he comes up in the summer, he was grabbing his internet off the tower.
yeah. And that's gonna go away, so he'll feel the
It's
pain.
gone.
He'll feel the pain and decide another way
I've
to do
been,
it.
I've been communicating with everybody.
Yeah,
And, you know, just trying to sort this all out, it's like, wow, ouch.
yeah. So, I guess what, I've spent the last, 10 years? First of all, I don't know if you're aware, the state hired me to work for the state because I had broadband experience outside of the state. And the state was trying to interconnect the perimeter of the state
Okay.
under a federal grant for 9/11.
Yeah.
For connectivity to the border area. And so they needed someone with expertise in doing networking. And I had to do a study as part of that. And one of the results of that study was we didn't have enough connectivity to get up there. And that's before the 3-ring binder fiber went in. And in this case, we have fiber right in the area on Old Augusta Road. So there's no major cost to bring the level of connectivity, provided they can configure the fiber within the cable back to that point of presence to give you enough connections through some kind of a link to your area. The technology, I'm not up to speed on to tell you what it is, but they have to bring fiber connections for all of you, or they may have enough extra fibers in the cable to do a splice out right into your area. And those things are cost drivers, by the way, in terms of how they do that.
Well,
So you
that's-
come up, but it's still very likely that just even though you only have 5 homes, when I was talking to the people that connect me about this problem, and I've been talking about this with them for the last year, when Julie joined the town as the manager, I had already started in looking at these pockets. How do we do this? And it was involving Chapel Road and Manktown Road as the most obvious ones. But then your road now remains to be a prime area that needs to be fixed. And the south end, the Flanders Corner Road is a similar issue, but it's a different basis because everybody's closer together. It's all the homes except for Saul Orff's house on the river
Yeah.
are all within, a third of a mile.
Just out of curiosity, what's the story on Noyes Road?
Noyes Road is covered with cable,
and
all the way to
It
the
is-
point of where it's private.
Spectrum.
So
Spectrum.
Spectrum is down there?
Yes.
As far as Raymond Raleigh's old house, what about the people?
Beyond there is a point where it becomes a private road. And the people up there have screamed at the town for not covering them, but because they're on a private road scenario. I've had quite a dialogue with one gentleman up there over the last 3-4 years about why we aren't doing anything any further in there. And he was trying to get more wireless connectivity into his area because they're down at the bottom by the pond and they're shadowed from the hillside from your tower. They weren't getting connectivity.
Right.
But the franchise agreement doesn't require Spectrum to do any private roads,
I thought Noyes Road was a
Should dig-
private
up
road.
to a point.
Up to,
Okay,
yeah.
well,
It's
that's where
public to the old Raymond Raleigh
All right.
household.
He's the one on the right as you're going up towards the part where it becomes private.
Correct.
It doesn't say they don't do private. They do if they feel like it.
Yes.
But we can't require them to do it.
Right. And the Connect Me Authority doesn't accept private roads for grants.
Right.
And that's a key. So, you have some comment about this?
Every time I go to say something, you guys cover it, so I'm just, if you do something, I'll fill it in. You're very thorough.
Yeah, well, we're trying to keep, so this area has been interesting to try and figure out, because initially I thought we needed to redo the wireless system to give it more depth than it has currently. And then, when we made our arrangement with LCI to come in up there, then it looks to be a better way to go, across the board up there. And, even there are grants coming out for Spectrum as well, by the way. However, I'm not convinced, but their policy, according to Julie, if she were still here, she would tell you they don't believe in 50-50 grants. They expect the community where they have the franchise agreement to put money into the coverage of a new area in addition. So I'm not sure how that works, because I haven't seen any Spectrum proposals that include the town putting money in as well as Connect Me.
Well, how's that happening on Chapel Road?
Chapel Road, they have enough people on that road that they fall within the franchise agreement.
Okay.
So they have to.
They have to.
9
And,
residents.
Reuben worked
Okay.
hard on that one,
At least we got some of
with
them.
the personalities involved in trying
So
to
the
get
folks
that.
that were here last time,
Chapel Road, yes.
Chapel Road is still,
They're in the engineering phase.
yeah, okay.
They're gonna get it.
So,
They're gonna
so
get
the,
service.
By
the other
August
interesting thing is
2019.
why we've been trying to get our arms around Spectrum over the last couple of years, and since Chapel took over, Charter, excuse me, they've been running around putting more cable in other parts of town and not, that are less likely to fit the needs. Like over there on Goshen Road, for example. They've covered all the way down to the railroad tracks now on Goshen, and all the way back up the old Augusta, the old Route 1. So all the way to a point where it stops, and there's nobody there, and then it picks up again right on the other spot. You know, there's a low place in the topology there where there's this open field, and it goes one way. We have a map of all this. Dick Glidden and I went around and made a map of all the different providers and where they are overhead on the poles. So we haven't had much interaction with them to know really what their goals are. That's the point of the discussion. Until we got to the point of pinning them down on Chapel.
Right, but there was one didn't they make an indication on how much money they'd put into Flanders Corner?
It's about 30,000, I believe.
Well, they priced it, the price kept moving up.
Oh, you mean Filer's Corner, don't you?
Do I mean Filers or Flanders? I
The
thought,
one,
we have
the
nothing
one that
with
we were going to
Flanders.
go for the grant,
yeah,
that was Flanders.
that was Flanders.
Who we talking? I'm sorry.
Spectrum.
Flanders. Spectrum
Talking about
of Flanders.
Spectrum.
For the last
Oh.
Connect Main grant.
And we wanted to work with them on this, but they came back and said we'd have to put in $6,000,
They would contribute, I believe, 4,000, and we would have to give 11,000.
11,000.
Right, so this is to go from Morse Corner Road up the south end of Flanders Corner Road towards the north for a third of a mile.
Ridiculous.
Right,
For that kind of money, I want glass. I mean, that kind of money, I'd want fiber optics.
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So so it's been a difficult task to work with them.
Well, for all the prices, whether it was Spectrum or even this one from LCI, we're just given the numbers. I don't know how that number came about. It could have been because they need to run more fiber, or this might be the low costs because there's enough to run it up there. So we
So
just.
it'd be
And same
interesting
with
to find
Spectrum,
out.
we don't
though.
know where that price came
That's a
from.
good point.
So that the point is that I'd like to make regarding that, it'd be interesting to know that. Because that tells us enough information as to whether it's worthwhile to give you any expectations of an outcome that's favorable. Because if it means they have to run another cable all the way down there just to serve you people, that's a huge expense. If they splice in right there, then it becomes a lot more practical consideration.
If they splice in at Old Augusta, you mean?
Yes, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right up
Yep.
Store Mountain.
Right, so that's the kind of detail that I'm in favor of having a meeting with them.
Is that my?
I like that.
That's,
I gotta go, boys.
You?
You got a call, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
You know, you're supposed to silence your cell phone
run.
before the meeting starts.
Be careful.
That was just movies. Keep
Thank you,
it-
Dick.
So moving on.
Yeah, so getting back to this,
Yeah.
so I'm trying to figure out a better way to communicate. When we first started out with LCI, Bob Butler and I used to just go over there and sit down with them. And they have a big map on the wall, situation map on the wall, they flash up. And we talk out how we can do
Yep,
these things.
we did.
And
But it was a big project, though, John. It was much bigger than this.
this one here, there's a little one, and then the idea of combining, and then they have a new person now that does grants over there.
Oh.
That's doing that because the
So
gentleman.
Alan
who-
Hinsey's not doing that anymore.
Well, he never did the grant himself. He-
That's right, they had
They have
some
a
guy.
person in accounting, actually their controller
That's
that
right.
does the grant
I
requests.
forgot that.
Alan's a higher level sales guy, if I understand.
What's
place
that?
correct. I think Alan's a higher level sales guy. if I
Yeah, he's
understand
our
that.
marketing guy.
Yeah.
You're right.
All right, so we need to somehow be able to have a meeting with Randall Manning, is the way I see it. But I'm trying to participate in that meeting, of course, and trying to see if we can't work out something that makes sense. One of the things we have to do is put together grant models, roughly speaking, to see which one would look the best.
Yep.
And there is a grant round that's coming up in
Well, it hasn't been officially approved yet, but they'll likely have approval done sometime in
Right.
January.
Do you have a guessy timeline at all, Max, on that? When they might do for the
I would
applications?
assume they'll vote on it and everything will start kicking into gear mid-January, so week or
Couple
two.
of weeks, okay.
Actually, the 24th.
24th.
Friday, the 24th at 1 o'clock. In fact, one of the things I was gonna suggest is that you and I go there together. I've been going to those meetings for years.
That's fine.
And introduce you to the people there so that they have a,
Well, I don't think Heather's going to be there anymore.
no, Heather's now the commissioner for DECD, which is quite a step up for her.
It is.
But I'm assured that the other gal there with the same last name,
Brooke.
Brooke, is going to be there.
Yep.
She tells me she's going to be in the mainstream of work. I've met all these people over
No
the
pun
years.
intended, of course. Sorry, I couldn't resist that.
Oh, my gosh. All right.
So anyway, what we need to do is get closer to LCI to see to see what their interest levels are in trying to work something out for a grant. Because the numbers that you have there do not involve a grant.
Right, this is just, we want to get an idea, because talking with someone initially, they were talking about, after the first 250 feet, and this was, again, now you know the rest, it's a Paul
Yeah.
Harvey, now you know the rest of the story. It was gonna be $1 a foot. All right, so 6,000, whatever.
Right,
Plus, all right, we can mathematically make that work.
right.
And then I said, well, that's why we put the letter of interest together, just to see, I can't ask people to do whatever, they gotta have numbers. And so when that came back, I don't know if you had a chance to see it.
I don't think I've seen
Yeah, that dollar a foot thing was for driveways, not
Yeah,
not
exactly.
the actual road.
Right.
So there was that miscommunication there.
Yeah, so, all of a sudden it's like, whoa.
So my gut, and this is not with all the facts, but says the best thing to do is to try and get a grant, just to go straight up to the last connection on your road.
Which would be us.
Yep.
And pool it with Flanders Corner?
And then,
Well, I'd like to
and then pooling it with the
I
other,
get it.
to see how it fits the model.
Well, I guess the other thing is, do you think that's a steadfast number?
Well, if I can jump in on two things. First of all, I want to see what LCI would estimate to cover Flanders Corner, because if it's the same number, okay. If it's higher or if it's lower, then we may have to do one or the other. But in terms of whether that's going to get the grant with just Store Mountain, spoke with Brooke about that, and it does all come down to the scoring. So you're likely not going to get higher points in the density, but that's
One fact, it's a rubric,
that's only
right?
that's only 10 points of a 100-point system.
Right.
I think combined you'd still get maybe
Very good. So
a C, maybe 70%, 71.
Right.
of that number?
70 out of 100, yeah.
So here's
So what
the,
would the percentage of the 23,000? What's the maximum they give out? Is it still
Well,
only 50%?
I'm basing that on 50%. They can go higher. They've given out grants at 80%, but you're not going to get points for that. You're going to get 10 points if you do 50% or less, 5 points if you do 51 to 60%, and then anything above 60% is going to be 0 points.
So, all right, so clarify, what do you mean by points?
So they do a 100-point scoring system for their grants.
Okay,
Whoever has the higher points will likely get their grants funded.
okay.
If you get like 10 points, you're likely not going to get it. And it's broken into 3 different categories. There's the cost benefit, there's the community support, or 4 categories. Then there's project scope and the value of it, like the community value. 10 points is determined by how much of the grant we're getting. And they've given 80% grants before on some bigger projects with better density.
Sure.
So no one got 10 points for a grant at 80%. So if we applied for a grant at 80%, let's say 80% of that cost, that's going to take your grade from a 70 to a 60, and is less likely to get done.
You get more points by providing more of your own financing, one way or
Yes.
the other.
so here's the other
The next
factor.
main pretty much gives, I'm not going to say preference, but it's more approving of communities that have more support for a project.
So, I mean, realistically, the town of Waldeboro is out of this totally, but do we then go to LCI to see what they'll be willing to do
Yep.
from a negotiating standpoint
Right.
to
So
bite,
here's
take a
another. Right.
bigger bite of the apple?
The way we did it before, what happened there was first of all, right now, there's $1 million coming into the state for the Connect Me Fund, roughly, every year, through local taxes. That doesn't take any federal money. At the same time, right now, what's happening, there's a whole nother layer of larger amounts of money available from the federal government going into for bigger projects that cover wide areas, like the Down East Economic Development Program they're doing. So that takes away the strain on the system and leaves this $1 million to be incrementally distributed on smaller programs, right? This is my vision. I don't know if it's accurate, but that's what I see.
Sure.
So what that means is when you add up all these grant requests that come in, and they've totaled them up, and there's like, well, gee, we still have $60,000. What are we going to do with that? Or $80,000? They may have to say, well, this little one fits, you see.
Yeah.
I'd like to try that kind of
Agree.
discussion on with them
Yep.
and informally. You know, that's one of the reasons why I went to all these meetings over the years, when I went up there to get the grants going for, because you get a chance to bounce
Sure.
ideas off of
Absolutely.
people while you're in the lobby or something.
Networking.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the way I want to approach this.
So we need to sit down with LCI.
Yeah. And we have to do it with some depth up
We
there.
need Julie to go to the meeting.
Right,
Yeah, it'd be nice if you and Max could go too.
yeah. Yeah, and then we try and work something up with them, because what I'm looking for is structuring our proposals so that we have what's called 100% take. Meaning everybody on your road would be willing to put down a deposit to have that fiber run by their property up the road.
Or at least a commitment contractually,
Yeah.
if not a deposit.
Yeah, and and so what it does for them, it enhances the value of their property. If they can get fiber connectivity, I could send you to any number of real estate agents that will support me on that.
Sure.
And,
And it probably gives you more points, because if
Yeah.
you can walk in with a scoring system saying, we've got commitments from all these people who gotta have this.
Yep.
They're looking for it, they want it, they've
absolutely.
committed,
That would be community support.
that's more points.
Yeah.
As long as you can have more than 50% of your road saying we will support this, then
He's already got it.
yep, you
Yeah,
would
the 6 people.
Yeah,
Maybe
you would
5
have-
people.
you would have a
And
So now-
Flanders would be, Flanders Corner, if you decide to combine them, that would be close to 100%
Right.
on that
Now, there's
stretch.
one hitch on Flanders Corner that we need to consider that makes them a little different. There are 3 poles that are missing. Every 200 feet, you have to have a pole in order to run cable. Where the reason why it stopped where it did, there's no poles south of that point for the distance of 900 feet or so. So there's 2 ways to go, either overhead by adding poles, but there's also a possibility they could do as they did from Old Augusta Road down to
Manktown.
Manktown,
Yeah,
which is to go under.
dig a trench.
Right. So that has, but I don't want that to necessarily stand in the way of getting sorted out and delay you guys, because if we could get you guys in,
It's all right.
Thank you.
yep,
See you, Bob.
yep, thanks, Bob.
We'll see you.
By, in time to put a grant request in for this round, this next round, then next fall, they'd have, be ready to, provide service.
I think it's gonna boil down to numbers, to individual costs. You know, we can talk hypothetically, but,
Right.
you know, I gotta present something to the people that are on this list, saying that, you know, if this were to go through.
I think a grant approach is still a strong way to go.
I agree, but still,
Yeah.
you know,
And then we
how
gotta
much is
get
the grant
people-
gonna cover?
Right.
You
and
know,
then
you still
It
got-
would be nice to get everybody on that road to want to participate with you. And that's something the town should help you with, by trying to make that happen, so that the pressure is borne by the town trying to complete the program. See, we're trying to complete our program. which
Sure.
is- Go ahead.
What kind of incentives could the town provide?
Well, these are things we need to discuss and figure out.
Tax-wise?
What's that?
maybe? Well, sometimes people get income tax, or not income tax, real estate tax breaks on certain things. What if, for a temporary period, people got, just throw it out there, a real estate tax break for having fiber brought down their road or into their home?
That's, because here again, what we're trying to
So-
do in this town, under the comprehensive plan, is stimulate the economy
So
by getting
stimulate,
people to move into this area that will help produce a greater economic wealth in this town, right? So these are these are the kind of things we all have to weigh and then decide, have Julie involved in writing the cover letter that goes with the grant request from LCI, so that we are partnered in the request. That's the way it's done. And I think it's possible to do this. And the person who used to do this was an expert at this in the prior history of LCI getting grants, and he retired. Jim, I forget his last name, but he and I used to work on this stuff. Indeed, he went to all the meetings during the lead-in stage once a month. I did too, and we'd listen to everything we'd hear, we'd speak, and then we got a grant. On top of a grant which we already had, that in their mind, we were able to convince them it was a failure. In this case, it's gonna be different. It's a grant we need to now finish up by completing all the roads that connect off the main grant that we got for fiber along. And the town has done this without expectations of residents having to pay out of their own pockets. And that's been a sore spot because, in my mind, because we put fiber in areas where people weren't committed enough, and we got very low take rates. So we have to do this in a different way so we can enhance the potential of high connect rates, high potential. And if people put a deposit for having fiber run by their property on the road, and they put a deposit on that and sign a contract that they're intending to connect up, that will enhance the whole process. But it's a new approach, paying up front. But it's not a new approach in the country, the way we do expansion for this kind of thing. That's it's new for for Connect Me, right?
You know, what you're describing is Google Fiber or that's a favorite one, but any of these new large ISPs in other parts of the country, that's how they work. You put some money down, you guarantee some interest, and it becomes part of your bill.
Right. Yeah. So I pay $70 a month, and I have 20/20 connectivity, and I've had it for over 2 years, and I haven't had one day of outage.
What do you have?
Fiber,
LCI?
LCI.
Oh, there's no question, that's the gold standard.
And there's such a low latency.
But it's the matter of how to get
It's
it.
called economics,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think there has to be some negotiation, obviously, with LCI.
Right.
There has to be some negotiation with the state and maybe with the town, to your point, about, you know, if that's even a possibility.
Right. Should find out if it is.
Because, you know, I think people would love to have it, but at what cost?
Right.
I mean, you saw the numbers.
Yep.
So,
Ouch.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one other thing we need. We need an activist member of the community who has the potential of having connections, who can help sell our need.
I'm already on several committees for the town.
So am I. So the point is that we need people, for not just in the committee, but also people that have
Right.
personal hardships because they don't have the connectivity, because they work from home or
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And to present and to write letters that get attached to the grant requests and so on. And then also, the other thing we need to do is make sure that the next grant request we give to LCI, that we have a sure bet for a high take rate.
Yeah.
And that's, I can't overemphasize that point. So,
I'll speak with Alan Hinsey from LCI tomorrow, just to talk about all this and see what he has to say. I'll see if they can come down from 23,000, but I don't think that'll be possible. But I'll see if they're interested in doing a sort of a final Waldoboro Connect Main grant, where the goals for Flanders Corner and Store Mountain, and I'll keep everyone posted. But
and so maybe you should add another, or doing each one separately on one at a time basis.
well, either way, I'll need to hear what Flanders Corner is going to be, because
Yeah,
what Brooke Johnson did suggest was, if the price is favorable, say it's cheaper, say 10,000 to do that one, Flanders Corner, we throw Store Mountain in and we get the density as well as 33,000, so that would have been 16.5. So it would be probably a better score if yours is cheaper,
right.
just to try and tie it in as one.
So that's great. So that's the kind of thing we need to do. And the fact that we have Max focusing on this in the town office too is a real plus.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean,
And I need to take him up there to the next meeting and introduce him to everybody and get him more into the mainstream of how, as you have already mentioned, how it's done. And I think that'll help. In the meantime, we're gonna sort out the alternatives, and we'll get together next month, the first Monday in February, and by then, I hope to have a heck of a lot more information.
I do too. The one thing that might be a hiccup is if LCI does have their own person writing grants now, they may do what they did last grant round and just focus on the one project a cycle, like they've only focused on doing Alna last time. So
Right.
if they see a bigger project this time, they may not want to do us. So that's just something to
So
Keep in mind.
my position would be to try and plead with them that they have to go back and fill in some of the pieces that they didn't get on Old Augusta Road
and I will
to complete that whole area.
Is this kind of information that you just mentioned, for example, only wanting to do one grant at a time, Is that kind of information a priority information within LCI, or is that
Well,
common knowledge?
Oh, no. I'm not saying they're doing that. I'm
But
just
you
saying,
observed it.
I'm just saying, last grant cycle, we came in maybe 2 weeks before it closed.
Mhm.
And when I told them about Storm Mountain, they said, well, we have someone doing Ulna already, so we're focusing on that. So I don't know if that's the same thing they're doing for the other grants going forward, or if that's
Right.
just, we were just late to the party. In which case, we would be quite early this time. Since,
So is there anything else in the formal meeting that we need to discuss before we adjourn?
No.
Then do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Can you,
hit the button.
thank you.